All right, welcome. This is Vav Tishrei, the Yahrtzeit of the Rebbe in China, whose Mesiris Nefesh is a sign and a capability that we all have through our relationship to the Rebbe and his mother. And this expression, Mesiris Nefesh, giving over of the soul, this is something that originates with God himself. God gives himself over. In the language of the Kabbalah, the creation goes through a multi-stage process, starting with God putting himself aside. It's the language, I believe, of the Arizal, though it could be the language of Moshe Cordovera. Not quite clear, but these are two major figures in the history of Kabbalah. The first step is called of God giving himself over, his Mesiris Nefesh, if you could say such a thing, is that he takes himself, the allness, and he puts some of it to the side, makes room for somebody else. That's the first step in a relationship, right? To make room for somebody else. And then what he does, the second step, is he brings forth a very small beam of light. And the light, of course, being a metaphor, a very small amount of godliness. And it has to be small. Why? Because if it were its natural size, there's no room for anybody else or anything else, because he is all that is. In Od Milvado, we've said that how many times? There is nothing besides him. So he has to create a sense of reality. It's a sense of reality. It's real, but it's also just a sense of reality that there is something else besides him. So he moves himself aside and he lets out a little part of himself, which is called the original Kav, the beam of light. So what we're doing here, what the Alter Rebbe is doing here, in this chapter that we're in this letter, that in the 20th letter, is giving us a Kabbalistic breakdown of the steps by which, a more refined view of the steps that lead to the to essence being invested in physicality. Many different levels, a myriad number of levels, uncountable levels. But they're broken up into tranches, sort of groups that we are familiar with or become familiar with through the language of Kabbalah. So, starting with the top level, which is Atzmus, essence of God himself, before he moves himself aside. And the next level is what's called Gili HaHelim. He is in a state where there is nothing else, and from that perspective, the everything which is going to be is completely concealed. It's concealed inside of him. And the first step is to reveal some of that concealment that's within himself. I guess we should say that everything that does exist, even the tiniest little ant on the ground, all of this exists in a primordial state from the beginning. As I say, there's nothing new under the sun. What's new is the revelation of the stuff that has been concealed, so to speak, under the sun. But it's all there. And in the first step, what he does, he brings forth a certain amount of revelation of that, which is, if we could use the language of our psychology, deep in our unconsciousness are the things which are going to move from unconscious state to conscious state. So that's also a way of looking at this. That's a revelation of something which exists deeply inside of us. And that step is called Gili HaHelim, to take from the Atzmos itself, the essence, and reveal something of that hidden state. That's the step number one. That's the putting himself aside, and then manifesting this little ray, right? Is the next step. So the next step is we have to have Gili HaHelim, which is the emanated state, and then we have Yesh Me'ayin, the next step, which is that emanation becomes something which we call something substantial, a yesh from nothing. It's not yet physical, but it has some sense of existence. and as therefore it's called a yesh me'ayin. And then after all that, so we have essence, we have Gili Ahelam, revelation of the hiddenness, we have yesh me'ayin, and then the last step is Seder Histalshalis. In other words, once the ayin, the all-inclusive nothingness, which is everything, becomes revealed, it then starts to devolve level after level after level, which creates the four worlds until we get down here into essence of God enclosed in the mitzvahs, the things that we do mitzvahs with. That's where God has encapsulated his essence in the physical, which itself is a profound thing to say, because the physical, on the one hand, is the lowest state, but this we apply the often cited in this class truth that's expressed in Sefer Yetzirah, that the beginning, Atzmus, is wedged in the end. And Hashem tells us this, by the way, in the very first word of the Torah. Before the very first word of not the Torah, but the first word of the Torah is Bereshit, the first word in the 10 utterances, the 10 commandments, they're called, in which he says, Anochi Hashem Elekecha, I am Hashem, your God. And Chassidus, or Kabbalah first, and then Chassidus tells us that this is also a manifestation of the stepwise devolution from Atzmus to physicality, because we have this body called the Torah with its mitzvahs, and the first thing that he says in the commandments is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and Aleph Nun Chaf Yud is Rosh Hashanah for I, my very self, I've invested in the Torah. And so essence becomes enclosed in physicality, and specifically physicality, the most dense of all place, the most concrete of all place, is the place that conceals the elikus, the godliness the most. And therefore, when it's opened up, when it's burst apart, a burst of godliness comes forth. And that's expressed in the language that we hear all the time of transforming darkness into light. So we, physical creatures with a godly soul, are the only creatures, we're the bottom of the chain, who have this embedded, intense light within us coming from the higher place, encapsulated in this small, intense ball of dark matter, so to speak, which is our really physical body. And that's an overview, really, of what's been going on in this chapter. And today we have a small piece which is going to describe this in a small way. And we'll now begin. Today's Tanya Vav Tishrei begins on page Kuf Lamed. Kuf Lamed means kal, easy. It's not easy, but it's on the page which is numbered easy. Opposite page 258. And if you're looking inside, 4 lines down, Vav Tishrei. Okay, so now we're starting to learn in very compact language. It's a very short piece today, what I've basically elaborated upon, but here are the Alter Rebbe's words. Reishis hayesh hanivra, the beginning of the yesh hanivra, the created yesh. Remember I said there's the essence of God, then there's the yesh hanetzel, he emanates a light, and then there's the yesh hanivra, something we call creation. Creation is much more substantial, right? He created, day 1, he created light, day 2, he created the heavens, and these are things, albeit spiritual things, not yet physicalized, but they're things. So the beginning of this yesh hanivra, that there should be a something which is, as the definition of being created, having initially, primordially been in his unconscious, but now coming to surface in the more conscious levels of Hashem. This is called the Yesh HaNivra. So the beginning of this Yesh HaNivra, of this created substantiality, the Tachalusai, and its beginning, his Chalusai, its beginning, the beginning is, in the language of the Kabbalah, is the Kalim, the Yud Spheres, the Biyah, the vessels of the 10 spheres of the different worlds, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Now these things with Bria, right? Bria means creation. Creation gives you the sense that there's a creator, so it establishes this sense of there's some degree of separation between the creator and the created. I mean, the model that the Alter Rebbe brings for this earlier in Tanya is a silversmith creating a vessel. He's a creator he takes a lump of silver. So we'll create a lump of silver is the initial ray, the initial Gili Mina Helam. There's something coming, it's emanated from essence, but it needs to be formed. So there's this silver in the ground, which who knows where that comes from. It comes from Hashem himself, of course. And it needs to be cleaned and polished and shaped, etc. So this is called the Yesh HaNivra. There's a Yesh, but the Yesh is initially in a state of Helam, a state of concealment, right? And now this is coming out from that state of concealment. And when it comes from a state of concealment, you could say, okay, here's a silver pitcher, a vessel which can contain something. So these are called the vessels of the Yud spheres, of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the 3 lower worlds. They're vessels, and vessels contain things. What is in the analog? What do the vessels contain? They contain light. There's light and vessels. Oros v'kelim. These are things we'll hear about all the time. The way the Kabbalists have understood from their prophetic understanding of Hashem, this terminology, light being energy, and vessels being the recipient and receptacle for that energy. A simple analogy we have down here in this world is electricity in a light bulb. Electricity is the ore, is the energy, but in order to radiate, to be ma'ir, to come out and see that light, you need a vessel. So these are the beginning of creation. We're using creation very pointedly, Bria, which is the world below Atzilus. Atzilus is called the world of emanation. Bria is a world in which there's a sense of something different than Hashem. It's aware of the godliness which is in it, but it's mostly aware of itself, and the self becomes something that hides Elikus, or he hides godliness in order to emerge a sense of self, a sense of other, would be a better way to put it, a sense of being something else. So that's the beginning of creation, is what's called the vessels of the 10 spheres of Bia. The Gamma Oris, and also the lights, distinct from the vessel, these are the energies, which is the Nefesh and the Ruach, right? In our soul, we've outlined in earlier parts in Tanya 4 levels of the soul, the lowest being the Nefesh, the physicalization of the spiritual in the body. Then we have above that the Ruach, which is the purely spiritual. And then we have Neshama, which is the source of that. And then we have 2 other levels, which are sometimes often grouped together, Chai and Yechida. So we have Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, actually 5, but sometimes often expressed as 4, corresponding to the 4 letters of the Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. I told you once, or maybe once, more than once, that anytime you have the occurrence of a number in the Torah, then any other occurrence of it and that number are related. So 4 levels in the name Havaya are related to the 4 levels of the soul. Okay, so we have the world now of Bia, the world of Bria. Bria it's not physical by any means, but it has some sense of substantiality relative to Atzilus, and it's created by the lights of and the vessels, the Nefesh and the Ruach. V'nivra and Nivrohu, and they are created, and there's created from them the neshamas of the beings who lived in the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, Shehu Elikus, which that life force, which is enlivening, the life force which is enlivening and bringing into being these particular worlds, is godliness, is Elikus. V'hein halamid kelim. And he's also, in the language of Kabbalah, there are 30 vessels. The way that this works, 30 vessels, you know and have heard, I'm sure, that there are 10 spheros, right? Chochmah, from Chochmah, Bina, Das, etc., all the way down to Malchus. And each of the spheros has three dimensions, three layers. There's the panemius of the sphere, the innermost. There's the middle part of the sphere, and there's the chitzonius, the externality. So these three levels times 10 spheres equals 30. So this is the language of Kabbalah. Lamed Ke, there are 30 vessels. Every world is a composite of all the 10 midos, and their three-dimensional way of appearing. So that's the 30 vessels. Of Malchus. Malchus is the one which actually instantiates the creation, right? Malchus is the king, the instantiation of God's regnancy, his rulership and his kingship over everything. So it starts, of course, in Malchus of Atzilus. And likewise, V'chein, the Atzilus, in Atzilus itself, the actual instantiation, so to speak, of that world of Atzilus is from the chitzonius HaKelim, from the externality of the Kelim, right? The bottom of the three-dimension, panemius, middle, and chitzonius, that the externality of it gives rise to the actual being of the world of Atzilus. So it comes from the chitzonius of the Kelim of the Yud Spheros of Atzilus, shehein elokus, which these 10 spheros in Atzilus are godly. Now, everything's godly. But what he means here is, in Atzilus, it's evident to the beings of Atzilus who are called emanated ones, the Netzolim, the emanated one. They see the godliness in everything. We don't see the godliness in everything. We live, and this is a gradual hiddenness that comes thicker and thicker and thicker as we go down and down in worlds. But Atzilus is not called creation. Creation starts in Bria. Bria is the word for creation. So there's a very qualitative distinction between the world of Atzilus and the three worlds below it. The qualitative distinction is that in Atzilus, there is an evidential experience of Elokus, the Netzolim experience godliness. And Nivro Hecholis de Atzilus, and from this emanation of godliness in the world of Atzilus is created literally the chambers of Atzilus. So every world has, this is the language of Kabbalah, chambers. It's like, I'm in my house, right? This is the place that I'm in. But this house has rooms. So the world of Atzilus, like the house, is subdivided into rooms. So these are the chambers of Atzilus. Shemishlabish behen bichinas ha'igulim, in which is enclosed the transcendent levels of godliness of the Yud Sephiros, of the 10 spheros, the Gam Gufis HaMalachim de Atzilus, and also the bodies of the world of Atzilus. So here I am in a body, here you are, somewhere out there in a body, hopefully still, in a room, in a house, right? 3 dimensions, right? 3 levels. You, the body, in the room, number 1, room in the house. So this also pertains to, remember, I said every number is consistent with every other number. The triad of chitzonius, the externality, the internality, the middle layer, and then the upper level, right? Or from top to bottom. Rosh Toich Soif, head, middle, body. Bottom, head, middle, bottom. So there's the object, the lower level in the house, in the room, in the house. So that's why they're called, it's the metaphor for all worlds, the metaphor being chambers, palaces and chambers. And in them is the Malachim, right? That's who lives in the house. And these are the Malachim, we're talking here of the world of Atzilus, these are the angels of Atzilus. And why we're concerned about angels, he doesn't really go into it on this page, because angels are called shluchim of the master. They're the ones who bring the force down, the energy down from one level to another. And they're the ones who take our energy and bring it up. They're the ones who listen to our prayers, the spiritual dimension of what comes out of our, you could look at this from the bottom up. The coarseness is the bottom. That's the chitzonius, the externality. That's our physical voice. But the physical voice has a spirit in it, right? Or we call it ruach. In human terms, it's called breath. The breath is more refined than the particularities of, it's like the shofar we blew on, right? The generality of it is the breath. That's the ruach, the spirit. The particularity are the particular tones. So we have the particular tones, then behind that is the breath. And behind that is the source of breath, which is deeper and not perceptible at all. The neshama, the ruach, the neshama of that enlivens our and that gives the force of life to our breathing. So there are many ways that you can look at this. This triad of Reish, Toich, Soif, head, middle, and bottom. So the bottom in the world of Atzilus is the body of the angels, Gufos HaMalachim of Atzilus, Shehein Bechinas Yesh, which they are in the category of something. They're not a physical something, but they're a something. We can refer to them, these constructs of godly energy, by various names. So they're a something. But Kamesha Kosev is written, it's written in Pasuk, Omalochav Yosim Tahala. It's written that the angels, they lack something. What do they lack? In other words, something is hidden from them. In order for anything to have an experience of a self, there has to be hidden that which is beyond the self, which is the Ein Sof. Or put it this way, in order to have a sense of, everyone has a sense of your bodiliness. You look around, you see that your hand is here, and out there is another space. And there's a sense of definition and demarcation between here and there. So the here is the body that you're in, is the substantiality. And then there's something hidden, which is the elikus, the godliness, which is underneath it. So the angels also, something is hidden from them. They exist to the extent that they can say, here I am. So they're not aware of that which is beyond them and which is giving life to them. So that means they're not completely bottled. Completely bottled would be completely given over, losing your sense of the demarcation between your, we'll take on a physical plan, losing your sense of the demarcation between your body and the space around it. That could be a rather raw but fairly decent metaphor. That if the boundaries were disappeared and we all flowed into each other, there is that part of us which flows into each other, right? That's the soul to soul. That's the basis of our ability to have soulful relationships with other people, because there's a commonality of ruach. I say that we have things in common. We like, so there's a commonality, but at the same time, we don't lose our sense that we're not merging into the one completely and the one into us. There's a sense of who I am and who you are. So with these things that are going on in the physical plane, they're very good analogies, I think. We are distinct from each other, and at the same time, we have ultimately a commonality. All of humanity has a commonality, which is its source in the one God and created in God's image. But there are definitions and boundaries. So they're not completely bittul. Back to our angels. The angels, since we call them something, they're not completely, their boundaries between each other and between God are not fallen down and dissolved. They're completely, that would be completely bittul. So, and they're not completely bittul. Be'olo, ke'olo legabi ha'ila, like the effect in relation to the cause. The effect, if you have a cause and effect relationship, the only reason the cause can exist is because, the only way that the effect can exist is because there's a predecessor cause. And put it, this is something we've spoken about before. If I use the muscle of a ball being thrown from a hand, the ball, the fact that the ball is flying is an indication that there's something which caused it to fly through the air. And if the ball had consciousness, it could look back and see that there was a person back there whose hand threw it into emotion. But in the world we live in, and in all the worlds, even up into the most sublime world of Bria, there isn't this sense that I can really identify where I came from. In Atzilus, they can, but here they can't. And down here, which is in the lowest of worlds, the Helam, the concealment is thickest, the darkness is the darker. This is the place which experiences itself as most separate, and to the extent that here in this world there are humans running around who have no sense at all of the existence of God, because it needs to be brought forth from you. And a person runs around with a sense of, why am I feeling lonely? Why am I feeling dejected? And those kinds of feelings give us a sense that I want to make a connection. I want to come out of my loneliness. I want to be raised from my dejectedness. But if I just look at the physical, I'm not going to get it. I have to come into something which is hidden deeper within me, which is ultimately the godly soul. But it takes work, because in this world, the obfuscation, the hiddenness is more predominant, and the godliness is more hidden. And that's today's Tanya. Any comments? Questions? Oops. I just lost it. Anybody?
I just want to say that I finally understand why always Malchus of Atzilus is mentioned and not anything else, because Malchus, you explained it today, that everything starts in Malchus. So the other
Yeah.
spheres in Atzilus, not that they don't matter, but
Right. It's not that they don't matter, but Malchus is the implementer, and brings with it everything from above.
I happened to just read in the Chayinu over Shabbos that the month of Teves is Tet Bat, that it's the daughter of the 9 previous
Oh, that's beautiful.
spheres,
Beautiful.
which is a 10th month, like
Right.
Malchus. And that's where Esther Hamalka got her crown.
What, in Tishrei?
In the month of Teves, Tet
Oh,
Bat,
Tevet. Very nice.
from
Shkoyach.
Levi Yitzchak Schneerson.
Very good. Shkoyach. That's the way your son gave you that? Is that what
No,
you said?
Schneerson, Reb Leivik, the Rebbe's
Rav
father.
Leivik. Okay. Not you referring to your
I
son.
know.
Okay.
All right, wait. I just want to say that
I'm waiting. Go.
just because you know, right after the Refuah Shleimas you started, I couldn't interrupt you, but we didn't do Hayom Yom.
Oh, wow. All right, so let's do it.
So, and it happens to be a particularly beautiful one. So,
Really? You want to read it to us?
sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me get back in front of it.
All right, we're exploring the letters of the word teshuva, right?
So,
And this is the Vav.
so for today, an explanation by the Rebbe Rashab of the third approach, abridged. Love your neighbor as yourself. As the Alter Rebbe explained, fulfilling this mitzvah is a medium for attaining the level at which one can love God, your Lord. It is also underlies the principle that anyone with whom his fellow man are pleased, God is pleased with. To love your neighbor as yourself is the path of tshuva that comes from a good heart.
Beautiful. And you could say, based on what we were saying, I mean, Tanya, why is it so indicative? Why is it what you just said? Because that's what God does. He puts himself aside for the sake of somebody else. So every time we do that, we are really imitating his ways.
Beautiful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Emir Hashem, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.